Saipan, where Tomas Menglonia is standing by. Good morning, Tomas.
Good morning, Chris Bree, Jason, and Joser. Just wanted to provide some updates based on the breaking story we reported yesterday about the traveler leaving quarantine early and being arrested. As we reported, CNMI freelance photographer David Butterfield was arrested and detained at the Department of Corrections on Saipan yesterday after he left his room at the quarantine facility at Canoa Resort, which is just right behind me here on Saipan. He also shared on social media that he's unvaccinated. Yesterday, we did an interview with the chairman of the COVID-19 task force here in the CNMI. We wanted to play a bit of that interview for you and for the latest yesterday with the chairman of the CNMI COVID-19 task force. Here's a bit of that interview.
Yes, hi Thomas, good afternoon, and thank you for reaching out to the task force. Just a brief update. Yes, Mr. Butterfield apparently left quarantine last night, and we're able to track down and, are based on our guest count, and we realized, as well as reviewing the camera, that he did left premises. So immediately we activated our law enforcement officers as well as our CACC contact investigators, and through communication with CEO Munya, myself, and the team, we were able to track the gentleman down and bring him in. This is a violation of leaving quarantine site. It's a serious violation. And right now he's in custody, and we are processing, working with the Attorney General in regards to this matter. He's still at DOC. We wanna go through the process, as well as doing our investigation. Apparently, person leaving quarantine before the actual release is we have our health process that in regards to contact tracing links as well. So we want to make sure that we cover all bases, and then determine whether next action on him, whether he's going to stay over at DOC or be transferred to quarantine. It all depends on the outcome of the contact tracing investigation. On him, whether he's going to stay over at DOC or be transferred to quarantine. It all depends on the outcome of the contact tracing investigation.
Thank you.
And as we reported, unvaccinated travelers who do not present a negative PCR test and are unvaccinated have to quarantine at least 10 days at a government facility. Villagomez shared that Butterfield remains in custody. That was yesterday, though. We were told that as of this morning, we do know that he's back here at quarantine at the Canoa Resort, which is right behind me. We wanted to also share that the Department of Public Safety PIO here on Saipan, Adrian Pangilinan, says that he'll provide more details as they come. Also, just wanted to share what we do know and what we don't know. Here's what we know. We know that Mr. Butterfield tested negative on day 1 and day 5 of quarantine. We do know that he was positive for COVID earlier in January and recovered since then. And we know that he does think he's safe and probably should not undergo the current quarantine procedures. We also know that he did not present a negative PCR test 48 hours prior to his arrival from Guam to Saipan. And he's also a returning resident. Just wanted to refresh the memories of our viewers who have been following the different quarantine protocols for the CNMI that have been updated. Wanted to read you the latest guidance that was released on September 24th of this year. So the latest guidance that we have here is that those who are fully vaccinated, regardless of travel origin, are still required to quarantine for 5 days in a designated government facility. Unvaccinated travelers will be tested, and all travelers will still be tested for COVID-19 on arrival and on their 5th day in quarantine. Fully vaccinated travelers will be released after they test negative for COVID-19 on their 5th day. The protocol also says unvaccinated travelers will be tested on their 5th day in quarantine, but will be released on their 7th day if they test negative and have submitted a negative PCR test dated no earlier than 48 hours prior to arrival. Unvaccinated travelers who have not submitted a negative PCR test will be released on their 10th day if they test negative on their 5th day test. And so it also says here the CHCC, which is the Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation, may conduct additional PCR tests on their 7th or 10th day when deemed clinically necessary. And so based on what we know on Mr. Butterfield's circumstances, he did fall under the 10-day quarantine, mandatory quarantine protocols that they set here. However, because he tested on negative on day 1 and negative on day 5, I believe he thought it was okay to go, and obviously that was not okay based on the task force and the government's guidelines. And we know that he was arrested yesterday outside of one of the businesses here on Saipan, brought to the Department of Corrections, and last we heard he is in fact here at the Kanoa Resort back in quarantine, and we'll continue to bring the latest on that guidance. And just in case if you're wondering what the enforcement does look like, we got verification from the COVID-19 task force here in the CNMI as well. They say, quote, given the importance of protecting our small island community, CHCC will work with the governor's COVID-19 task force and local law enforcement to enforce penalties on non-compliance of the mandatory quarantine requirement for arriving travelers. Violators of this important protective measure will receive a maximum of no more than a year imprisonment and or no more than a $500 fine as provided under law. And last we heard, Butterfield might just face that $500 fine. Of course, we'll bring you the latest as we hear it here on Saipan.
Tomas, is there any thing from the quarantine officials, the government officials, on how he was able to walk out? I mean, over here, because I've been in quarantine, and I mean, they're pretty strict. It's like you're in and there's no way you could get out. I mean, unless you pass somebody.
That is the biggest, Bree, you're so right. That is the biggest question on everyone's mind right now. Yesterday, of course, they were focused on tracking Mr. Butterfield down and putting him into isolation. We'll get you the latest on that. We will ask the COVID-19 task force. And as always, they do have their weekly press conferences. And I can't imagine this won't be talked about there on Friday. So we'll bring you that. But he said he posted on Facebook. And as we reported yesterday, he just walked right on out. And I think as we reported, I wasn't here at the Kanoa Resort when I was in quarantine. I was at the Pacific Islands Club. And when I was at the Pacific Islands Club, there were people posted at the doors at the entrances and exits, at least when I was able to go see them for my testing or just to peek out to get my food or whatnot. But other than that, I'm standing outside right now. I see, at least 2 police officers posted at the entrance here. I'm not sure if there's any other way to get out of here other than the beach side at the back, but it's a big question, and we will definitely get that answer as to how this could have happened. And also a lot of people asking what the Attorney General response will be, given that the task force chair said that they are working with the Attorney General on this matter. And of course, as we know, this directive signed off by the Chief Public Health Official, who is the hospital CEO, Esther Munya.
Right. Tommaso, what are the people of the NMI saying about this guy walking out of quarantine?
I think you see mostly some reactions of people saying that understanding why quarantine is needed. As we've been reporting, the CNMI has been without community transmission for more than 200 days. However, if you also just look at KUM's Facebook page on the story that we posted, you'll see the diverse perspectives that exist on the island as well, and people saying, free Butterfield, fight for your freedom. So no shortage of opinions here. But of course, we want to get down to the facts and what is allowed, and what's not allowed. And I'm sure this is just the beginning of more of the, Chris, what did you call it last year? The quarantine tales?
Quarantine Chronicles.
We'll have more on that.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Tomas.
Thank you so much.
All right, Tomas. Tomas Manglotnia from the KUM news team, doing some great work.
Yep. Live in Saipan.
And let's go back to the KUAM newscast here, 8 o'clock, brought to you by Pacific Points. Once again, Sabrina Salas-Matanani.
And just real quickly, the Guam Memorial Hospital suspending a long-time Halloween tradition, citing safety precautions.